We are looking at the exciting pedagogy of conversation, the activated classroom teaching pedagogy of conversation, and how it can transform how we teach and learn in the classroom. We can take static content, whether it be PowerPoint slides, whether it just be a document, and change it and make it so exciting by adding a layer of conversation to it. In this particular lesson, we want to look at Spiral. Spiral is one of my favorite tools because it can be used either in a blended learning environment where you are working with your students in the classroom and engaging them in conversation, or it can be used in an online environment where you give your students content that they're going to look at and have a conversation around in their own space and time. So in other videos, I've looked at Quickfire. Quickfire is a great way of just engaging your students with questions, giving them a question and letting them answer with an autoresponder type system using their devices. But in this lesson, we're going to be looking at Discuss. And so all you've got to do is come into spiral.ac, and once you have logged in, you will discover that it's very simple to use. There's home, classes, and students. Now, you essentially, if you really want to get the full value out of it, you set up classes and you register students to those classes. You can use it without doing that. So for example, with Quickfire, you can simply get your students to come online and with Discuss without them having to register. But if you want to be able to track which students have done what, you just need to spend a little bit of time registering your classes and your students. So let's have a look at Discuss and how we can use this great tool as part of the Spiral suite to engage in the pedagogy of conversation. So Discuss works around content. It's about having conversation around the content. There are two major forms of conversation being used as a pedagogy. The one is where the content is controlled, where the content is closed and centric. Essentially, this is content-centric conversation. Then you have another form where it's all around the conversation. So the content's very open, and those are your discussion forums and your chat rooms. So in this particular example, we are looking at having a conversation around content, and that's something that happens all the time in the classroom. And so, for example, instead of just having normal slides that your students are busy looking at boringly and doing nothing, we can make it interactive. So you have two options here. Option one is to actually create a slideshow, add slides and questions to spark a discussion. Or if you already have a slideshow, which is what I'm going to use, you can upload it into Spiral. So you simply choose your slideshow that you want, that you've created in PowerPoint, and that is going to be uploaded into Spiral. And what's exciting about this is now we can use Spiral to have a conversation around that content. So rather than those slides just being something that our students sit and boringly sit at, and even when we say any questions, invariably we get exactly that, deathly silence, we can actually engage them in some conversation and get them to answer using their phones, using their devices. So this is what Spiral does. It takes those devices that are sitting in their hands and they're either using them for some other thing, it encourages them to use it for conversation and to get involved in the lecture and to get activated. So we've imported this little slideshow. It's got a couple of slides. It's called Girls in Programming. And you'll see the slides down the side here. So it's simple as that. I've imported my slides. I can even add additional slides if I want to. I'm not going to do that at the moment. And basically all we've got to do is now save and teach, or we can just save it as a lesson plan and use it later. But let's have a look at save and teach. As I said earlier, you have classes and students, so you do need to add this to a class. So I'm just going to choose one of the classes that I've already got set up. Now, there are two options that you have now. The one option is essentially your blended learning option. So I'm going to launch this because I'm going to be teaching my class right now. I'm going to be teaching this and I want them to use their devices to answer questions and to get involved in conversation around my slides. The other option is to set as an assignment, and that is obviously online learning where they'll be able to view the slides and then make comments. So both of these are supported, but in this example, let's have a look at the blended learning option. So we're going to launch this. You would obviously be connected to a data projector, and these slides will now be projected on the screen behind you. So what the students will see is it'll tell them to go to gospiral.ac, and they'll be asked to put in a code. So at this point, the students will go onto their devices and they will enter that code. And as they enter their code, they'll also be prompted, if they haven't already registered as a student with a student name, they'll be prompted to enter a name. Now, if they're just joining as guests, the nice thing is they can use any name. The benefit of that is obviously it gives them a little bit of anonymity, so they can use names that might not be too scary or threatening to them and keep their identity private. So as each of the students enters their details, enters the code simply on their device, and this works very well on any device, particularly on little smartphones. It works absolutely perfectly. They can enter their names and their names will appear on the screen as all of the students come into the room. So simple as that. The students are busy typing and registering on their devices, and so we've got Bob and Sue have now joined us. Now, up until this point, the students' devices are essentially locked. So it's quite nice. We've got them looking at their devices. Don't ban devices. Get them to use their devices to be part of the learning experience. So they can look at their device, but essentially is locked down for this particular activity. They can't type anything until we hit go. So when we hit go, what's going to happen is if you look at the student device, you will notice that they can see the slide on their screen as well. So this is really great. They can actually see the slide on their screen, but there's now an option for them to engage. So why should girls learn to code? So the students now have an opportunity to type in the answers. Now, as soon as students type the answers, you'll notice down the bottom here, it shows us that 2 have now typed in their answers. So I can see now that 2 students have typed in their name, or the answers rather. Now, I haven't revealed the answers. So what's quite nice about this is we're going to wait for the answers to be revealed when all the students have submitted. Now, if we look at the student device, once a student has submitted an answer, they can see what other people have typed in. So only once they've submitted, or when I click reveal answer. So now once I click reveal answer, I can see what the different students have typed in. So we've got 2 people, because it's a great career, to get better jobs, sort of similar answers. But what is nice is the names are not revealed. So this is great. Again, if you are using the students' proper names, their names are not revealed. That anonymity is important because it encourages students to participate. You can, of course, reveal the names, and by clicking that, I can now see who typed what. Now, those are 2 answers. Students have submitted them. They can see the answers. They can see it on their screens, and now we can click continue to next slide. So say something about this. There is a quote on what coding is, and all of the students will now see this as well on their devices. Talk about it as you would a normal slideshow, and if you've got any questions, you can ask the students to say something on that, or alternatively, you can just continue to move on to the next slide. So you don't necessarily have to ask the students to say something. You can leave it, they can put in a comment, or I can simply move on to the next slide. So maybe this one, I asked them something. Well, who do you think the first computer programmer was? And there's a picture. Is that a clue? Well, now the students have an opportunity to say something about who they think it might have been. I can see 1 student has now submitted an answer. 2 students have submitted their answers. Fantastic. Let's have a look at what they came up with. Mrs. Cobol and Ada. Okay, so I can see both of those. Mrs. Cobol, I know, is actually wrong. This one is not bad. It's close, but do they know exactly? Because that's just the first name. Now, what we can do is we can hit improve, and what that does is if we look at the student's device now, the student will get a message saying you've been asked to improve your answer. So they think about it and say, oh, do they know the actual full name? So if they do, they would then type that and resubmit it, and Ada Lovelace. Absolutely, it is Ada Lovelace. Now, what is really nice as well is clicking correct here indicates on the student's device that they have the correct answer. And so 1 out of the 2 students has got that correct. So again, we're encouraging them to get involved in the conversation. Now, at any stage, if we want them to have their attention riveted to us and not doing anything else, I can simply hit lock devices, and on their devices it'll say pay attention to your teacher, because at stages we want them to look up and pay attention to the teacher. Right, let's now move on to the next screen. Now we can unlock the devices, and as we can continue going through all of these questions. So let's move on to the next screen. So, my coding adventure, what it was like, what do they think coding would be like? Is it something they would like to get on? Why would they want to be a coder maybe? And so yet again, students can now submit their answers. So I can see one of the students has submitted why they think coding is a good thing to get involved in. 2 students have submitted. Time to reveal the answers. It's only really for boys. I think it'll be easy. Now, if I was standing in this class, I would immediately say, wow, that student says it's only really for boys. Is that really the case? What do you all think about that? Now, if I show the names, I can actually see that Bob has said that and Sue has said that one. Now, maybe what I could do is say, well, do you think that's true? Now, in a big class, for those students to engage in a conversation between each other would not be particularly easy. But if they look at their devices, Sue can actually see Bob's answer on her screen. It's only really for boys. And she can reply to that. So I can immediately see now there is a comment that has now appeared on this one. So what's happening is people are having a conversation around this comment. We can pop it open and I can see, oh, that's crazy, said Sue. The first program was a girl. So what we're now doing is the conversation is not only moving between the teacher and what we've put up as our question and the students, the conversation is now moving between the students themselves. And this is really exciting, especially in big classrooms, because you can end up with students having conversations with one another and with the teacher or through their devices. And so that is essentially how we continue to encourage conversation around the pedagogy and around slides. So we've got fixed content, we're having conversation, and when we're ready, we simply hit finish discuss. Now, what's really nice now is it doesn't have to end there. This is an example of blended learning. So we're projecting slides behind us, students are having a conversation around those slides. We could quite easily extend this, giving the students an opportunity to continue this discussion in their own time. So if we do that, that means the students can continue in their own time to have a look at the slides and have a conversation and answer the questions. And that brings us into the online learning realm. Or if we finished, we simply hit finish and the conversation is over. But what's really good is the students, if they look at their device, they can see all the slides. They can see if there were answers submitted to the slides and whether those are good answers. All of that remains on their device for them to look at in the future. So Spiral is a great tool to support conversation around content. And this is really important because what it's doing, it's adding a layer of conversation to your content. We can do similar things with videos. We can do it with documents. It's very exciting when we take content, add a layer of conversation, it all of a sudden activates it and transforms it to a totally new realm. So that is the activated pedagogy of conversation using Spiral.